Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing The Lord of the Rings, The Fate of the Fellowship from Z-Man Games. The Fate of the Fellowship is designed by Matt Leacock, the creator of Pandemic, and this is based on the Pandemic system. Also, if you are a regular viewer of the channel, I'm going to be leaning away from my regular review format and trying to lean a bit more into a general experiential aspect. I'm not going to be doing what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking. I'll be doing a general experience of the game, which inevitably will include some of those points. I do welcome your feedback as far as what format you prefer whenever I experiment with new types of reviews. But that said, The Lord of the Rings, The Fate of the Fellowship, like I said already, is designed by Matt Leacock, put out by Z-Man Games, and it's based on the Pandemic system. It is a 1 to 5 player game, I believe. Yeah, 1 to 5 player. I played it at 1, 2, and 3. I have not done 4 and 5. I'll give you a general short overview of how it plays, not going into like specific detail, but just general overview of how it plays, and then just dive into my thoughts and opinions. This is based on the Pandemic system. That means it's going to follow a lot of the same general nodes in this cooperative experience. You're going to have various characters in this world. You have different characters. Each player takes control of 2 characters. Unless you're playing solo, in which you take control of 5 characters, there's some different rule sets in play, but you take control of 2 characters, and then every turn you do 4 actions with one character and 1 action with another character. Those actions are going to involve a lot of things, but they're generally going to involve you trying to work towards your objectives. You have different objectives in play. I believe the game comes with 24 different objectives, and you only use 4 in each game, although you can ramp it up to like 5 or 6 for a challenge, but generally speaking, you're going to be doing 4 to 6 objectives out of those 24. These objectives all represent various key iconic moments from the Lord of the Rings universe. For example, that makes 6. This objective requires having Legolas in play, and he's going to take pot shots at various enemies along the way using his ranged attack action, and that's going to result in that makes 6. Again, a key iconic moment. All of these end with you doing Destroy the One Ring. That's always in play, and it's the final objective because thematically you have to destroy the One Ring. You have to wander into Mount Doom with Frodo, spend a bunch of ring cards. You have different cards with different elements on them. You have to spend some ring cards in order to go ahead and then destroy the One Ring. You're using your 4 actions primarily to move around the board, to engage in combat against the enemy forces, to rally the allies of the various shires, the Middlelands and Middle-earth. You're rallying those allies. You're trying to overthrow strongholds. You're taking a bunch of these actions all as you work your way towards whatever specific scenario objective is in play until you eventually can move your way all the way to Mordor and then eventually get rid of that ring. The turn cycle again is very Pandemic-ish. 4 actions, 1 character, 1 action with another. Then you draw 2 cards from this deck to add to your hands of cards. These symbols will be helpful for a variety of things. Usually they're going to be required for different objectives, but they have different things that they're going to do. You can use multiple swords to overthrow a stronghold. You can use hearts to save yourself from negative search rolls when you're Frodo trying to wander around the lands, because these Nazgûl are constantly going to be trying to hunt down Frodo, because after you draw your 2 cards, you're going to draw shadow cards. That means you're going to go to this deck over here and draw shadow cards equal to the threat track, which is going to be 2 right now, but can work all this up to 5, and then you're going to be moving the forces along pathways if it's a red banner, and then doing the bottom part over here, adding new forces and taking effect if it's the black banner. These effects over here will often have the Nazgûl slowly trying to chase down Frodo and trying to hunt where he is, which is going to make movement for Frodo significantly more difficult, thematically appropriate for what's going on in this universe. So again, cooperative experience, accomplish your objectives, destroy the One Ring, take 4 actions with 1 character, 1 action with another, draw 2 cards, draw out the shadow cards, rinse and repeat that cycle until you eventually lose all hope. Genuinely, that's what you have to lose. If you lose hope, you lose the game. Various things are going to make you lose hope. When the forces of Mordor wander into a haven, you will lose 3 hope. When you have to add units to the board and there aren't, you lose a hope for each one of those. When you have to draw cards and there are none left, you lose hope for those. And as well as when you have the Skies Darken card, which is one of these cards which will cycle the Pandemic cycle over here, when that happens as well, if the Eye of Sauron is in the same region as Frodo, you're going to lose hope, which means you're constantly trying to escape that eye. Again, very thematic. So that's basically what's going on over here, which means I'm going to go ahead and dive into my my thoughts of the game. I've played this a bunch. I had a chance to play it at UKGE, with actually Matt Leacock, which is a very cool experience. From there, I've played it on Board Game Arena as well. I don't think it's quite as good as Board Game Arena. I think there's a lot of collaboration and talking through things that I don't think is as good unless you're really willing to pop up a webcam and play with your friends online, which could be different. But Board Game Arena is still fun. I've played it as well in person. I've played it solo. So I've had a bunch of plays at different player accounts with this game, and overall, I'm really enjoying it. and I don't necessarily know what I wanted to expect out of the game. I like Pandemic as a system. It's one of the first games I ever played. Pandemic Legacy is one of my favorite games I've ever played, that adding a much more experiential aspect to Pandemic. But I've also played a lot of Pandemics that weren't as fun. Particularly, I played Pandemic of the Clone Wars, which was the last time I dove into an IP I like with Pandemic, and I wasn't super impressed with that. I didn't think it was a bad game necessarily. I didn't feel the thematic element strongly, and I felt the Pandemic system was weakened. Contrasted with Lord of the Rings over here, with the Fate of the Fellowship, I think this is an excellent job at leaning into what Pandemic does well, while also giving you a very narrative, not necessarily narrative, thematic, emergent narrative almost. You have these moments in the game that are going to both be thematic, both be mechanically satisfying, while also being very thematically satisfying at the same time. And I think that's where this game shines, especially if you are a fan of the IP, because I am a fan of the Lord of the Rings IP. I don't know what this would feel like to someone who isn't, because I think that the main areas in which this is better than Pandemic is in the sense that it manages to carry that system forward while giving you a very thematic experience in the ways that the game just happens to naturally happen. There's so many things that happen in this game. Like, I remember one of the times I played, I was playing as Boromir, and then Boromir had a quest in it play where he would die effectively. That was his quest. That's his objective that he had. Now you can play Boromir without having the objective, but that's the objective I had him play. And then I died, and it has you select a new character, and randomly, you do it randomly, and randomly I selected Faramir, which was very cool. That was like a moment where like Boromir's brother shows up to avenge him, so to speak. And that's just a random thing that can happen, but so many of those things happen throughout the game. And some of those are intentionally by design, and some of those will just naturally play out because you're working within an IP that is this rich as far as how it's doing things. The way the Nazgûl are constantly chasing you, I love that aspect of the game. You do feel hunted as Frodo when you are trying to wander, and Frodo has a mechanic where he has to spend extra resources to wander or perform a search, and searches will have you rolling dice for each Nazgûl or enemy in your spot and losing hope if you roll those tree symbols. So you have this aspect where you're trying to manage your movement in the game, trying to spend cloak resources where you can, and that's something you have to juggle, but you constantly feel under threat by the Nazgûl. The Nazgûl are constantly, every time you draw these cards, they're constantly swooping into your region. They're not always going to do that, but they generally are moving to either Frodo or to the Eye of Sauron, and the Eye is also moving to Frodo, and that has a natural evolution as they kind of move to your region, then you pop out feeling a breath of fresh air as you can. If you're wandering with Aragorn, well, Aragorn's going to help you evade some degree of those negative searches. He helps you hide, which is again a nice little thematic element, because you can have Aragorn in the game doing off his own little adventures, taking out the various baddies, because he's also good at taking out the forces of Mordor, but he's good at helping Frodo hide, and you have to decide which need is greater in your current game. And so having those Nazgûl constantly chase you around the board, that's a nice thematic element. The way the cards, the way the characters, the enemies are going to slowly move towards the havens, trying to assault them, that's also nicely thematic. The way you have Mordor as a haven full of all, not a haven, as a stronghold full of all the enemy forces that you have to come in either through the front door or alternatively trying to sneak in through the back, you have those options as far as how you're going to approach this. And again, it has that, this is a nice little thematic element as far as how am I trying to make this work? How am I trying to accomplish these goals? The whole entire thing gives you a cinematic experience, and it does so while giving you varied objectives, which is going to ensure a different game experience every time. Yes, it's true, you have to always wander into Mordor to eventually destroy the One Ring, but you have all these other different things you're doing along the way as far as these different objectives go, and they will force you to consider different pathways or strategies and how your characters are going to synergize. Speaking of characters, you have a whole roster of characters over here. We have these 5 over here, we have all this deck over here, so we have Gollum and Gandalf and Eowyn, Faramir, Boromir, we have Arwen and Eomer and Galadriel, along with these 5. That's a lot of characters to play through in the game, giving you like, it feels like this is Pandemic plus a few expansions built into the core game experience because of the sheer amount of content it gives you. And speaking of those characters, I love the way the game kind of incentivizes you to rally together, to journey together, but also to separate to achieve your own goals. One of the nice changes from original Pandemic is when you move, you can move other characters with you without spending any extra resources. And that does incentivize characters to utilize their movement to move towards where they need to go. But then sometimes you're wandering along a pathway before you realize that, Aragorn needs to go ahead and shift somewhere else to go ahead and deal with enemy forces or to accomplish a goal. And suddenly you're splitting off, but then later, before you know it, you'll be back together, journeying along different pathways, and that kind of splintering off and coming back together feels very thematic to the Lord of the Rings universe, and the game naturally has that happening through the action economy of the game, but also the need to split out and do your own thing. That change of having each character, each player in the game control two characters, it's such a shift from what you typically expect. Like, if you play Pandemic, you can play two characters, but it's never been a required element before, and I think it works so well. This game wouldn't work as richly if you only had two characters in play. And so by ensuring that a single player game has 5 characters and a 2-player game has 4 characters, that means your minimum player count, your minimum character count in the game is 4, which allows a lot more for that splintering off and then coming together as you go. Now, it's not a perfect game. It does give you the Pandemic vibes as far as the mechanics of the game. It gives you the Pandemic strengths. It does a lot of small things different that do feel like nice tweaks to the game. It has the cinematic feel as far as the board presence, these Nazgûl, this giant dice tower where you can roll your little dice through the Eye of Sauron, which is a pain to assemble, but is worth it and fits nicely into the box. So you have all these nice things, the character variety, the objective variety, all these nice things are happening, but there are some things that hold the game back for me. And what I mean by that is, this is a game that I kind of wanted to give a 5 out of 5. I'm not going to because of some specific elements that hold it back, but I've had a lot of fun with it. And that's the thing, like, when I think of 5 out of 5s, a big criteria for me is games that I just am always down for. And this currently is still at a place where I'm always down for, but there's just enough friction on that I have to pull back that rating a bit. We'll come back to ratings at the end, but like, just in terms of the enjoyment I've had with this, it is the core system of Pandemic combined with variable feeling gameplay because of the way the objectives and characters play out. I haven't even played through all the characters yet, nor all the objectives. There's so many of these things, and they all give you different little feels. Like, Legolas is generating extra cloak symbols for Frodo to hide with, but he's also using those to potshot various elves. You have, we have Gimli, who helps you muster troops for free in different areas, and you have characters that do that in different areas, which means you always have one of those that can muster a bunch of forces, including one of those can be helpful, certainly not required. I have one without them, but they give you a lot of free economy. You don't have to spend cards to get those forces in play. But again, variety, all these things are excellent. Some of the things that hold the game back, I'd say that first of all, from a visual perspective, the game can be a bit messy and intimidating at first. It does come together once you start playing it, but there's a whole lot of lines weaving throughout the board, and it is a lot to keep track of. And when you are moving units along these lines in order to move them to a region, you do have to find the area, which can take a little time. Like, I like the world of the Lord of the Rings. I'm not an obsessed fan with it. I don't know every name of every shire of every kind. I just know, I know Rivendell, I know Moria, I know Helm's Deep, I know the big ones, but past that, when you're trying to say, hey, where's Peneth Gellin? I have to look a lot to find Peneth Gellin, but I will find it over here. That said, I will say over multiple plays, I have gotten a sense of where the various regions are, which is going to be relevant to the objectives, as well as to these cards that are drawn in order to try to track the pathways of the enemy forces. But the first games was definitely slower. It was helpful to have, Matt Leacock handling game 1, BGA handling game 2, and then I had to start learning it all myself through multiple games. But by the time I got to my third play running it myself, at that point I had a good sense of where the various regions are. But my first play running it myself, I was definitely spending a lot of time tracking where various spots are as I try to follow these lines, because the way it works is when you follow a line, you find Moria. So we have Moria over here. Moria is trying to go to Erebor, which is going to be over here. You have to find the specific color line and then chart moving over there, which means if you had a bunch of forces along the way you would play that out is you would sit there and say, oh, well, here's the line. We're not going to move this into this and these into this. Rather, we have to work our way backwards. We have to move from Erebor to Moria in a certain manner of speaking. We're going to move these guys here. We're going to move these here. We're going to assault the stronghold. We're going to place a token over there. And suddenly we just lost We Hope. That's not good at all, but that's because I just added the guys to the board there. I wasn't defending there. But you have that aspect where it certainly is a little bit overwhelming as far as the board knowledge, so to speak, and tracking of things. That's not where I ding the rating, by the way. That's just something that's worth keeping in mind. Where I ding the rating is that in this game, the nature of the cycles, the nature of, well, everything, the combination of objectives you're trying to do and the characters you have in play and where you are, and sometimes the fact that Frodo might be very hampered as far as the ability to move because of the Nazgûl. Sometimes in this game, and when I say sometimes, I'd say almost every game will have some degree of this. How much does vary. But sometimes you're just waiting to draw the right symbols that you need. If you don't have characters that are generating symbols, like right now with Merry and Pippin and Legolas, I can generate heart tokens, I can generate cloak tokens, and with Gimli I can generate sword tokens. So right now I can generate 3 different tokens, which gives me a lot of control. But if you have different characters in play, and all of the characters are incredibly satisfying as far as the abilities they give you, but if they don't give you some degree of reliability, so to speak, you might find yourself hampered trying to find the specific symbols that you need either for your quests or just to get your hands on the One Ring. rings. The many one rings. That's called the one ring, but there's many of them in the deck. They all add up to the one ring. So when you're trying to get these symbols, or you're just looking at the board structure trying to make it all work, there are certainly times where you're kind of just waiting for things to happen. You're trying to get those cards, you're trying to pace it out and just sit there and wait. And so every Pandemic game I've ever played certainly has luck of the draw. I don't mind luck of the draw. I don't mind the idea that, early on something hits us hard and before you know it, everything's crashing down around us and then, oh no, we lose. But it can be such a fun thematic experience, and you do feel like the thematic, again, whether you win or lose, you feel sucked into the theme of what's happening in this game, which I like very much. Where I don't like it is sometimes you just have to play a waiting game. The waiting game is not as satisfying. Doing well, having what you need, being able to move towards your goals, that's satisfying. Watching the world fall down and collapse around you because either bad choices you made or sometimes just the luck of the draw, that's a little less satisfying but can be very fun in its own right. But just waiting so you can draw the symbol, just taking your turn where you're like, I guess I'll move somewhere to cash a card. Basically, there's an action where you can prepare, where you can take a card and you can say, oh, look, well, that's not going to be a good one over here. If we get to Gondor over here, we can move to a haven in Gondor and spend an action to, well, that depends. It's a little more complicated. If you're playing it solo, then you have to do a specific region matching. So solo, you'd have to do a region in Gondor, but otherwise you can prepare at any haven. So you can go to a haven and you can prepare a card. That's great. But sometimes you find yourself doing that as the only thing, turning a card into a symbol because there is a hand limit, and that is, like, sometimes you're doing it because it's necessary and it feels like you have to, and that's okay. Other times you're doing it because you have 3 to 4 actions and you're just playing a waiting game, so you may as well prepare a bunch of cards in a haven, and that feels less satisfying. It feels like you're just engaging with the game's necessary ways to spend action economy while you try to get the right resources or cards or situations at hand. And I think that aspect, more so than anything else, is, and again, it bothers me because every game I've played has had some degree of, okay, we know what we need to do, now we're just waiting for those cards to show up. And again, sometimes it's been very, very little, sometimes it's been more than I would like, but that's the only real thing that holds back the experience for me. That said, I have loved the experience so far. Again, even now I debated, do I give it a 5 out of 5, because I'm currently in that mindset where I just always want to play it currently. I'm sure that will move downwards the more I do play it, but at this moment, anyone who suggested it to me, I would be down for it. It doesn't have the highs of some of my highest games, but it has just a satisfying mechanical experience that pairs well with a thematic feeling that also has these key moments. Every game I've played has had key moments where I'm like, oh, look at that, they're joining up in Rivendell and they're doing this, oh, these characters came here. Some of them are by design, because as you do certain objectives, you're going to have that. I mean, That Makes Six is a specific objective, a moment from the movie that you have to replicate, so it actually doesn't feel as cool as when those moments happen naturally, and they happen naturally every single game. I had a game where I had Gandalf sweeping in with a ton of forces from, like, he was just sitting there elsewhere gathering forces, and he came to the battles with his forces, and no objective required that. It just happened to work out that Gandalf was on the board with his little pawn. Let's find our Gandalf pawn. We had Gandalf just on the board with a whole bunch of forces with him, and he's just, like, swooping into a battle to help out. And that's such a fun moment because that's what happens in the movies. Well, in the books. It happens in the books. That's what happens in the books and in the movies too. But the fact that it happened naturally through playing the game, and the fact that every game has those moments, if you are a fan of the world, whether you're a fan of Pandemic, whether you're a fan of Lord of the Rings, and for sure if you're a fan of both of them, I think this game will give you a lot of those moments to truly enjoy and appreciate, which is where I'm at. Which brings me to final thoughts. Final thoughts on this one, I'm giving it a 4.5 out of 5. I don't know, that rating might shift up over time, it might shift down over time, but for right now it's a 4.5 out of 5. It would have had that 5 if not for the fact that every game has had those moments of playing the waiting game, which I just don't find as satisfying as a player. But outside of that specific one complaint, this has been a very rewarding Pandemic system that I was looking forward to playing, but also very much was hedging my expectations, because I think that's smart when you not every Pandemic game has hit the same way, and the last one I played, the Clone Wars, definitely didn't hit the same way. So for me, this was one where I was very almost relieved to enjoy it, but then the more I got to play it after that first game, the more I realized how I'm always down to play it, and that's a level of enjoyment that definitely deserves some degree of recognition. If you're looking for other game recommendations, definitely check out my favorite Pandemic system, Pandemic Legacy. I think Legacy Season 1 is probably my favorite there, but Pandemic Legacy Season 1 is my favorite, then Season 2, Season 0 was good, but I think Season 1 and 2 are the better ones for me personally. And then outside of that, if you're looking for something that's going to bring you the theme of the Lord of the Rings, I haven't actually properly played it, but I am going to recommend War of the Ring. I usually try to have recommendations for games I've played. Once in a while I make an exception, and I think this is one of those times, because I can almost see the comments from people who have played War of the Ring who are like, Alex, this is why you should be playing War of the Ring. This is the thematic experience that we think you'll get out of it, which I believe. Everything I've heard about War of the Ring tells me that you're going to get a much heavier game, it's a competitive game. It's not cooperative, which is one of the things that makes it less fun for me, but it still can be a ton of fun. But that aspect of that thematic feeling of playing through the universe, if you want that, definitely check out War of the Ring as well. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. I hope you found this review helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.